So let's talk about this second great awakening and its various strands, ramifications, and consequences. An incredibly fascinating time. Um, so, in the early to mid 19th century, you see the spread of new kinds of religion, some of them Christian and some of them not really. Um, and you particularly see them again with a lot of intensity in regions that are experiencing this market revolution. Partly that's because I think the growth of cities and industries and wage labor brought a lot of uncertainty to people's lives, and people turned to religion to seek certainty. Um, but there's also an optimistic, confident element to it too. It's like this new technology and all this rapid change and growth of wealth gives people a sense of confidence, of an ability to transform their world, and that plays a lot into the Second Great Awakening, understood broadly as well. So at the core of the Second Great Awakening is a new trend in Christian religion that has a more optimistic, hopeful tone than earlier Christianity in America. The dominant theological idea in America from the colonial period was Calvinism. And Calvinist theology basically believes in predestination. It believes that you are born either saved or damned, either headed to heaven or to hell, and that there's really nothing you can do to change that. That's something you're born with. Now, it still encourages people to live in this very sort of elevated spiritual way, because that's supposed to almost reassure you and the people around you that you are one of those people who was picked to go to heaven. But ultimately, Calvinism is a pretty harsh theology, and it's one that doesn't have a lot of room for human freedom, human agency, we would say, the ability to make choices. So you can see how that's kind of out of step with, for one thing, a culture that's become a lot more democratic with the Jacksonian Revolution, and a culture in which you're seeing all this change and this seeming power of people to change and transform their destiny. We have westward expansion, we have the market revolution, we have new technology. So a lot of historians would say those changes kind of made Calvinism resonate with people a little bit less. So the new version of Christianity, which is often called evangelical Christianity, grouped under that label, was based around these big meetings, these raucous public meetings. They're called revivals, in which sinners are invited to stand up and be saved. In other words, they make the choice to be saved. They have conviction in their heart. They have an emotional, personal reaction to the sermon, and they say, I want to believe in Christ. I want to go to heaven. You still see these kind of meetings go on today. You can still find revivals in America. They're a little less common in New York City nowadays, but you could certainly find them there too. Now, one interesting thing is that one of the places where this religious movement had the most intensity and where you would see the most of these revivals is in the region that stretches along that new Erie Canal. So that sort of tells you something, I think, because the Erie Canal, you see these new towns springing up along it, boom towns, towns that now are really bustling and engaged in trade and production because they're along this waterway. So it shows this kind of alignment between, again, the market revolution and the enthusiasm for this new kind of religion. The most popular preacher associated with evangelicism, which you're going to read one of his sermons, is this guy, Charles Grandison Finney. But I said it's not all just Christian religion. There's a kind of general awakening to movements, both sort of secular and spiritual, that promise new possibilities, new ways of transforming the world. Uh, we have, for instance, the Oneida community in New York, founded by John Humphrey Noyes. That's a utopian community where free love, or what we might now call polyamory, was practiced, which would surprise a lot of people to think that that was going on, often among sort of respectable middle-class people who joined these movements in the 19th century. That was just one of a bunch of people who founded basically communes, places where people would live together and try to create, sort of in miniature and microcosm, their idea of an ideal society. There were communes that were sort of socialist. There were communes that practiced free love. There were communes that practiced much weirder and more esoteric spiritual ideas. In some ways, some of these places maybe were a little bit like cults, but in other ways, they are inspiring examples of people coming together and trying to create in real life their vision of a perfect world. And there was a belief at this time, with all this change going on, with all the new possibilities that had opened up, that this was really something that could be done. There were also many spiritualist groups who believed in the supposed science of communicating with the dead through means such as table rapping, listening to noises made on tables. We can imagine in an era in which, electricity is new to people's lives, and most people don't have electricity in their homes, of course, but it's electricity is involved in this fantastic technology that allows people to communicate over long distances. The telegraph, something people never would have thought possible before. If something like that seems like something out of fantasy, out of magic, has just appeared, why wouldn't you believe that maybe somebody has discovered this scientific method of communicating with the dead? All these are part of this kind of general vibe of mid-19th century. Again, with its greatest intensity in the North, that anything is possible, that the whole world can be remade. And one of the most important things to emerge from this kind of vibe is reform movements, such as calls for reforming prisons and schools, banning alcohol, giving women the right to vote, and perhaps most importantly of all, ending slavery. It was in this period that a minority of people began to have this view of slavery that is similar to what we have today. That slavery was not only an unfortunate reality or something that should eventually be gotten rid of, but that it was an intolerable evil that had to be gotten rid of immediately by any means necessary. This kind of abolitionism movement to abolish slavery is called immediatism. And immediatism began to take off in the mid-19th century. One of the most important figures in defining the new tone of abolitionism was this man, William Lloyd Garrison, founder of a magazine called The Liberator. He was a fiercely evangelical individual, and he saw slavery in terms that we might understand it also today, as a sort of sin, that damned America. And I just Googled the date when I wanted to get that date. 1831 is when he started that magazine. Very, very important magazine to the history of abolitionism. He was known even for trampling on the Constitution at his rallies because he believed that document had, baked the sin of slavery into American society. We talked previously about this kind of controversy over the place of slavery in the Constitution. One important fact about all these reform movements is their participants disproportionately belong to a specific demographic: middle-class women, white women. This is the result of a significant change in how middle-class women are thinking of their role in society in this period. So one change that had happened is the growth of the market economy had created a lot more jobs that took place out of the home, including sort of the modern office job, the modern white collar job of the clerk, the technician, the manager. There were a lot more jobs like that. And men were the ones taking those jobs, even though there were some women working outside the home, like in the Lowell Mills. These kind of respectable middle class wage earning jobs were being taken by men. And that was taking men and sort of men's work outside of the middle class home. That's significant because the sort of old middle class home had been like a prosperous family farm, or that was the standard one, a prosperous family farmer, maybe a crafts workshop, in which work is taking place basically inside the home, on the homestead, and often involved men and women working together, especially on the farm. There might have been slightly different roles for men and women, but they're sharing work and their work overlaps. There isn't this clear distinction between like the man works and the woman stays at home, right? But that distinction starts to develop for the middle class among the people who are fortunate enough to have a man who can earn enough money now working outside the home to keep the wife at home taking care of the kids. And in that sense, the role of the woman starts to be rethought as, okay, it's less about performing labor, helping the man with his labor, and more about keeping the home and instructing children and making a virtuous, moral Christian home and raising the children with the right moral attitudes. There were precedents for that idea in American culture since the 18th century. People talk about this idea of Republican motherhood, the idea that the mother's role is to raise the children to have good, Republican in the sense of a republic, in the sense of a representative democracy system, that they were meant to raise their children with those good patriotic values. But this idea begins to grow that the woman's role is to perpetuate morality in the home. And that's, again, I think it relates to this idea of how the market economy introduces this level of uncertainty, and men want reassurance that, they can come home to this place that is going to be peaceful and elevated and wholesome, and whatever changes go on out there, the home is going to be this stable, benevolent, healthy place. And that's women's role to carry that out. So women who have some kind of ambition, middle-class women who have some kind of ambition, are able to sort of expand this role to say, okay, we'll be the moral instructors of society. In fact, we're going to take that outside of the home into activism for the whole society. We're going to be sort of mothers for the whole society. We are going to assert and share our ideas about how the society needs to be made more virtuous and more moral. And so that brings a lot of women into these reform movements, temperance, so on and so forth. Another factor is, of course, the presence of a lot of immigration, the idea that introduces chaos, or that the immigrants, particularly the Irish, are, hard-drinking guys who maybe aren't that virtuous, are going to upset the culture of America. And so the cause of banning alcohol becomes one of these big causes that middle-class women are participating in to make the society more virtuous. But it is the banning of slavery, And that idea, as you can probably imagine, as it gains currency and popularity, and as people who are fueled by this kind of moral conviction that they can transform society, that anything is possible and that it can all be done right now, they begin to assert this conviction that slavery must go. That is going to cause problems for peaceful relations between the North and the South. And we're going to talk about that. Thank you.